Professor Seyfried, you were saying that glucose and glutamine are feeding the cancer cells. So if we can construct a diet so that we don't get glucose, what can we do to stop putting glutamine in our body and get it out?
You can't do it.
That's the part.
You can't do it. It's not possible. So because the glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body, and it can be made from other sources. It's called non-essential. So your body makes it. You can make it from glucose, as a matter of fact.
Even plants, you get glutamine from.
Yeah, so it's not, we need drugs, unfortunately. But the drugs can be specific and in low dose, as long as it's working with all of the other things. So there's no way in the diet you're going to target glutamine. So, as far as I know, it's just, glutamine is such an important amino acid, part of the urea cycle, it's part of our immune system, our gut needs glutamine. Glutamine is and the cancer cell needs glutamine.
So in the last 500 patients that you're aware of who followed this protocol, what happened? Were they able to do better than traditional cancer patients by following this no glucose, glutamine?
No one has done this. It hasn't been done. We were the first to try it on a brain cancer patient, but we used chloroquine and EGCG, that's the green tea extract. It's not as powerful. There are the drugs out there, 6-diazonorlucine, but they're toxic, but you have to know how to use them in very you have to know how to strategically use them to not harm the body. There are drugs available. I think it's going to have to come down to a combination of very healthy, nutritious foods and specific kinds of drugs. And it has to be done strategically. Somebody has to know how to do this.
So if someone followed the exact protocol that you believe would work best, what would you predict would be their success rate against cancer versus traditional cancer treatments?
It's hard to say because, we know, let's put it this way. We can't know until we do the correct kinds of studies. And right now, in the big hospitals, we have standard of care with metabolic therapy. Metabolic therapy includes targeting glucose and glutamine, maintaining the correct nutritional balances that you need. And the missing group from all of the studies that have been done to my mind is the key control group with metabolic therapy without standard of care.
Yeah.
And that's the missing group.
They're hard to find.
And you can't get anybody to do it. No hospital will allow it.
Exactly.
So the very organization that needs to be involved with this is part of the problem. And without that group, we cannot answer specifically your question.
The only way that it could be done is to do what Dr. Esselstyn did with heart disease, which is basically people go to him who are volunteering. They're saying, I don't want any more drugs, I don't want to have any more procedures, I'm going to do what you say, and then he's followed them for 32 years. And that's the only way I see it happening. So we're starting to do that. Yeah. We're enrolling cancer patients in a survey program to track them and their decisions so that someday, probably after I'm long gone, we'll be able to answer that question. But you're right, because it's considered unethical to not give patients treatments, even if they don't work, if it's the standard of care. So you can't have that control group.
Well, then we have to come to the changing of the policy. And that what I'm doing is writing case reports and publishing them in the literature, which allow physicians to look and say, maybe we should do this on a bigger scale. And that's one of the ways we can, because you got to break the system the way it is, because it's not working for so many people. And I think we need the groups, and the scientific evidence is there. It's not like this is all unknown. I mean, there's thousands of research papers to say that this will work. It's just that it hasn't been done. And who pays for this, right? When you do a clinical trial, there's a lot of issues. You have to have a hospital that buys on. You have to have a sufficient amount of money to pay the physicians, to recruit the patients. Who wants to pay for a possible therapy that may not generate the same degree of revenue that other therapies generate?
Right.
That's the problem.
Right? So I had a patient, I gave a talk at a hospital up in Michigan, Sparrow Hospital actually, and I was telling people this, and one of the radiation guys gets so angry he wanted to leave. And I asked him later, I said, why are you so angry? He said, well, if this stuff you're talking about, we're going to have to close half the hospitals in the country because radiation generates so much revenue, it keeps the other processes going. And I said, I don't know how to address that.
Right.
So this is,
Can
you're
you
up against
imagine
a revenue generation system as well.
We devalue human life to such a point. What happened to these young doctors? I mean, I don't know a doctor that did not get into it for the right reason.
I'm going to try to answer Stephen's question directly.
Well, I think you probably will do better than me.
Okay, so how do you know you have cancer in the first place? Bleeding, pain, swelling, some lump, a sore that doesn't heal. There's a lot of manifestations. Everybody may have a different manifestation in some organ, stomach, liver, different colon, breast, whatever. So you get you have someone tell you, looks like something's going on here. Okay, what does it look like? Well, there's some image. Something's amiss. Oh, look at the scan. One thing I will never do is have them take a biopsy, because there's enough evidence in the literature to show that you run a high risk. It's like putting a stick in a beehive, the bees come out. I'm telling you, there's papers in the literature that support what I'm saying. I can share them with everybody. So I don't do biopsies. So, okay, we do non-invasive evaluation. The diagnosis comes, yeah, there's something there. You're coughing blood. Yeah, there's a spot on your lung. Blood in the stool. Yeah, we looked and there's some sort of a lesion on your colon. Okay, take the blood work first. Okay, you're in there. Okay, run me a blood. Let me see every lipid, every protein, everything that I'm looking at, because I use those as biomarkers. First thing I would do is I would scan my lipid biomarkers. What's my triglycerides? What's my LDL to HDL ratio? What are my electrolytes? I would look at those, and we would talk about it with a physician that would know what's the healthy ranges and where you're at a little bit. What's your vitamin D levels? What's your creatine? What's your ferritin? What are all the markers? So you look at the markers. So you know where your body is at the time you are diagnosed. Because many people are pretty healthy when they get their first diagnosis. They don't look like death warmed over. Not everybody, but a lot of people say, gee, I didn't know I had cancer. It's only after the treatment you look like you're dead. So the first thing you do is you get all your markers. Okay, you got all your blood work. You make the decision. You use, there's no question about stress. As a matter of fact, the diagnosis raises blood sugar. Stress raises blood sugar, feeds the tumor. Absolutely, you don't have lymph nodes removed because you need those. You need the parts of your body that are healthy. You don't want to be ripping out things that you're going to need to facilitate the resolution. Radical change in diet, there's absolutely no question about it. Whatever you're eating, got to change. Okay, so the first thing I will do is get myself into therapeutic ketosis, because we know we're going to shrink those guys down, and we're going to make the margins really sharp. We know this. We've done it. I have preclinical evidence I can show you tomorrow. So what you do is you shrink the thing down, but you got to keep your body healthy. So what you get to, wow, therapeutic ketosis. That's like walking on hot rocks. Okay, you are in charge of your own health. You have to know that it's going to require some part of your, you just can't turn your soul over to someone who is clueless on the biology of the disease. You have to know to yourself that, okay, it's going to require some participation on my part. What does that mean? I've done water-only fasting. It's a bitch. It's always easier to tell somebody to do it than do it yourself. It's not easy, but I've learned from my friends that if we use the diet that will bring us into therapeutic ketosis, which means you have very low blood sugars and your ketone elevations, the tumors go into a kind of a dormant state. and they start shrinking up. How long you can keep them in that state depends on how long you can maintain therapeutic ketosis. And there are diet ways, there are a lot of different ways that you can maintain that. If you go to the Hippocrates Health Institute, if I were to go, I might, it depends on what I would have. I would have my own glucose ketone meter, and I would know every day where I stand with respect to my therapeutic ketosis. Amazon, $38, get the strips. That's a very powerful tool to tell me that I am in therapeutic ketosis. When I'm in therapeutic ketosis, I know for a fact those tumor cells are not going to be growing. They're going to be dormant. Now, they're not all going to die because I told you the glutamine issue. And one of the things that Brzezinski uses, anti-neoplastons, which actually are targeting glutamine. There's a lot of ways you can go after that. I would have to look at my list of drugs that I know that would be able to work together under the condition of therapeutic ketosis, and this is what I would do. And I would battle the disease day in and day out. I might consider not going to work for a while. Yes. Stress is not good. People say, well, I'm under chemotherapy and I'm working every day. Listen, you put yourself at risk. Yeah. That's all. You put yourself at risk. So you want to get your body back into a homeostatic state again. And I agree, these cancers just don't turn around in 3 days. I mean, you've had these things for a long time. So you can get rid of them in time. It's just like you put on weight. All of a sudden, you put on a lot of weight. Gee, well, it didn't happen overnight. You're wearing 150 pounds on Tuesday and 400 pounds on Wednesday. So the weight comes off gradually. The cancer goes away gradually. Yes. And you just bring your body into a new, healthy state. You don't go into this radical, let's cut it out right away. Mm-hmm. Let's nuke and poison you right away. Mm-hmm. No. You have a lot of chances to think very carefully about all your options, knowing how to do this. And this is what I would do. And if I were to go down, I would be going down on my terms.
You got it.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. People always ask me, what are you going to do if you get cancer? Well, I know what I need to do. And a lot of what was said here is absolutely spot on. It's you have to have a tool. If you know the tool, if you know what's driving the disease, then you know how to manage the disease. Let me tell you. The mitochondria in cancer is screwed up. What that means is they have to ferment. There's only two fuels in the body that can supply the energy for the growing tumor cell, and that is glucose and glutamine. Now, it sounds simple. It's easy to target glucose. It's not so easy to target glutamine, for what Brian said. The immune system uses glutamine. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to target glutamine, you've got to be very careful about harming your own immune system. The other issue is that all metastatic cancers, or the majority of them, are the immune system. People in the scientific field are grappling with this, which means that our own immune system is the metastatic cancer cell. Mm-hmm. They use glutamine, okay? And our normal immune system uses glutamine. So how are we going to kill this guy if the very cells we need to get rid of them are also using the same fuel? There's no question about what Brian said. You have to kill the cell strategically without harming the normal cells of the body. Mm-hmm. So what we have is you have a strategy. You know what the cells are eating, because without energy, nothing lives. So we take the energy away from the growing tumor cell, transition the body over to a fuel that the tumor cells generally can't use, which are ketone bodies, and then we strategically go after the glutamine, but we pulse and press. So we actually, and I don't know of a diet yet that can target glutamine. There's many diets that can target glucose, but glutamine you have to be very careful about. So this is cutting edge now, we're even thinking about adding glutamine back, the very fuel that the tumor cell needs to use, after we use certain kinds of low-dose drugs to hammer the tumor cells and slowly degrade them. I agree with what everybody said here. Going to the Hippocrates Health Institute and using these combinatorial therapies while maintaining the health of the body seems to be a very logical way to do this. One of the things that I would not do, ever, is take chemo. Because what is the purpose of chemo? It's to kill proliferating cancer cells, right? This is why they do it. They do use radiation. Why? To kill proliferating cancer cells. But if you pull the plug on their energy, they're going to die. They're going to die just as if you were to use chemo. So why use chemo when you can pull the plug on their energy? The problem is, the biggest problem is that the medical community doesn't know about this. I feel bad. The physicians that I speak to, the oncologists, are always shocked when you tell them this because they never heard of it. They're not trained in medical school. These people are not bad people. These are good people. They're trying to help their patients. The problem is they just simply don't understand the biology of the disease they're treating. This is sad. And nutrition does play a massive role. So when someone says, oh, nutrition, go home and eat whatever you want, that's misinformation. That's not accurate information. It's a combinatorial issue. It's a body disease. You have to maintain the health of your body while you strategically eliminate the tumor cells. And you can do this. And we're on the cutting edge of doing this. But I'm not going to say that we have a blueprint that works. The only thing I can say is that we've looked at every kind of a cancer, and they're all the same. There's not breast cancer, brain cancer, bladder cancer, colon cancer. They're all the same. They're all fermenters. They're all the same because we know that. Okay? We've done this. We've looked at this, so we know what their vulnerability is. What we have not yet done is we have not yet perfected dosage, timing, and scheduling. And I think what Hippocrates does and other institutes like this, and there is going to be more, by the way, because we're working on clinics that want to target and kill cancer cells without toxicity to the rest of the body based on an understanding of what the fundamental issue of the disease actually is. And it's very rarely going to involve radiation and chemo. And another thing about the immunotherapies that you hear about, that you hear on TV every night, you don't see the papers that show that this stuff is also can kill you very quickly. There's a paper that just came out in JAMA. You get hyper-progressive disease from some of these. And you know, it's very strange because people think, well, I'm going to go in for an immunotherapy. And you know, Steve Allen from Microsoft passed away very recently, died in 2 weeks after starting the treatment. Blake Nordstrom of the Nordstrom department store, physicians very optimistic, dead in 2 weeks after starting these treatments. So let me tell you, no one dies in 2 weeks from metabolic therapy, I can tell you that. Yeah, well, I think the sugar issue is a problem. It's very hard to, the body makes sugar. You can stop all the sugar you want, but the body's gluconeogenesis makes sugar. Mm-hmm. All right. So and if you eat a lot of meat, the amino acids are converted into glucose. Mm-hmm. So if you and I agree with the raw food, just eat little of it. Good raw food in lower amounts, I think will be the best approach. Some people say, well, I got to eat a lot of meat now because I'm not eating sugar. That's not good. But eating all vegetables may not be good either. It's very hard to know this. It's each person has to know what they need to do, but I would agree with the organic and raw foods and cooked foods, and as long as it's in small quantities.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the general scientific concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, We will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
Do you believe the average person is getting accurate, unbiased, scientifically proven information from their oncologist?
Not likely. But it's not the oncologist's fault. The oncologist knows very little about this. They know about how to treat, use certain procedures to treat the disease. They're not trained in medical school to know anything about nutrition. And in fact, if they get anything at all, it's like a half-hour course in their whole medical training. So they're not trained to use food as medicine or know anything about the healing and therapeutic power of different kinds of foods. So I would say at least 90% of oncologists would be unfamiliar with that terrain.
Subsequently, do you believe the average person is getting accurate, unbiased, scientifically proven information from the medical industry as a whole?
No, there's a lot of controversy about this. Unfortunately, from what I read and what I see, the food pyramids and all of these things, they're influenced by special interests to a large degree, which then creates massive confusion on the population. So it's very hard to wade through what's healthy and what's not healthy. But I think a lot of common sense will tell you whether eating broccoli might be less harmful to your body than eating Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, if someone were to substitute every night broccoli for donuts, I think you'll find a difference in physiology after a while. So, but there are a lot of foods that I think are pretty healthy for you or not harmful and things. My field is not nutrition, okay? So you're asking me questions that I can speculate on this stuff, but it's not my field. We're into targeting energy metabolism in cancer cells. And if you eat certain foods, they could be facilitatory, and other foods might be disruptive. So it's hard to say. It's a very complicated area, but the answer to your question is, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation that comes in this industry as the result of inputs from special interest groups that are powerful enough to push their pitch. So, and then the poor person has to try to wade through what they think is the correct information. And that puts a lot of people, so that's why you hear it even at this meeting. Can you eat this? Can you eat that? Do you recommend this to you? I don't recommend anything. I'm not telling anybody what they should do. Just measure your blood sugar ketone index, and that pretty much gives you a snapshot of where you stand. Look at your triglycerides. Look at your ratio of HDL to LDL. If you have imbalances in these metabolites, try changing something and see whether you can bring the metabolites back in their correct zones, and then do it on yourself and see what happens. I know you can't everybody doesn't have the ability to do that. You have to go to some of the clinical chemistry labs. But I think there are places that you can go and get a quick blood reading on your HDL, LDL. Cholesterol is not a marker for this. It's triglycerides are a more important marker for cardiovascular disease than is cholesterol. The ratio of cholesterol, HDL, and LDL is important, I think. But many of the other, having low insulin levels, low glucose levels is good. Insulin is a provocative hormone. It's a very sensitive, powerful hormone that should be in very low quantities rather than, insulin insensitivity puts you at risk for cardiovascular disease, dementia, all kinds of things. And you keep that in a low ratio by avoiding, it's high, if you have diets that are high in fat and high in sugar, those are the ones that put you at great risk because the sugar and the fat work off each other. But if you have a diet that's low in sugar and higher in fat. You lower triglycerides. We've seen this ourselves. Fish oil, we were shocked to find out how powerful fish oil was, actually. You get lower triglycerides with fish oil. So we did some of these studies, but it was only in relationship to trying to manage cancer or seizure or epilepsy.
Do you believe the average person is getting accurate, unbiased, scientifically proven information from the FDA and other governmental agencies?
Well, here's the problem. There's not even a consensus on the part of the scientists as to what's appropriate or inappropriate. Okay, there's a lot of controversy, even among major scientific centers. So how is the FDA going to be able to make a correct decision when the information that they receive itself is not settled? So, this is one of the issues. But, most people, if they understand things, people know that there are ways to live a healthy lifestyle and there are ways to live a less than healthy lifestyle. And I think a lot of it is common sense. And people read into so many things in such a deep way, and he said this, she said that, they said this, they said that. It's all upside down. Well, I'll just do whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to continue to do what I was always doing, which may or may not be good. So it's it's not easy.
What is the exact research that has brought you to the conclusion that sugar feeds cancer?
Well, that was started by Otto Warburg in the showing that, and then we fed mice different diets that had different amounts of glucose, sugar, and there was a direct relationship between how high the blood glucose was and how fast the tumor grew. And we tested that. So, in fact, we're doing some nice experiments now where we're trying to raise blood sugar as high as we can possibly get it to see whether or not we can accelerate tumor growth. We want to see if there's a particular diet we're trying to find a diet that will allow tumors to grow faster than ever recorded, that anyone could possibly imagine. So now it's just the opposite of what people would think. But if you can show people that there is a particular diet that will accelerate your tumor growth faster than any other diet that we can know of, then that would be good to try to avoid that.
Do you recommend avoiding all sugar all the time?
No, I don't recommend avoiding all sugar all the time. I think that sugar is part of our evolutionary past. We would go for ripe fruits, honey, and these kinds of things. But I think that processed foods that have high nutritionally depleted, high sugar causes systemic inflammation in the body, type 2 diabetes, and a variety of other chronic issues. And I think that contributes in many subtle ways to the different chronic diseases that we have: heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and these kinds of diseases. So people should just be aware that drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, eating a lot of donuts, puts them at risk for systemic inflammation, which then puts them at risk for various chronic diseases. So I think it's probably good to recognize that. So if some people say they don't care, then there's nothing you can really do about it. And the obesity epidemic in the country is a consequence of people having foods that are loaded with high sugar. It's not the high fat. The body can't get fat by eating fat. Fat is either burned or excreted. It's not stored. Sugar is stored as fat. So when you see someone that's obese, that obviously came from the glucose and the sugar molecules that they eat, because that can be converted into fat. But fat is not converted into sugar, for the most part. So the idea here is if you eat high-fat, low-sugar diets, you'll lose weight. And if you eat high glucose, low-fat diets, you're going to gain weight. So you just have to know that, and then you make decisions.
Is it possible to prevent getting cancer?
Yeah, it's very possible to prevent getting cancer. The problem is we live in an environment that makes it very difficult to implement what must be done to prevent cancer. All cancers start from damage to mitochondrial respiration in a particular cell, in a particular part of the body. So how do you prevent damage to the mitochondria of the cells that ultimately elicit? So if you metabolize ketone bodies, that protects mitochondria from the development of reactive oxygen species, what ultimately leads to disorder and entropy. Entropy is the second law of thermodynamics, which is disorder. We all die from entropy. We don't live forever because our bodies break down. That's called disorder. Entropy, second law of thermodynamics. So in order to delay entropy, you keep your body and your energy metabolism as clean as possible. So if you burn ketone bodies as opposed to sugar, which is pyruvic acid basically most foods come down to pyruvic acid, you can delay entropy, and that will allow you to live longer. The problem is most people don't want to do that, and they don't know about that, and therefore what I just told you is not known by the majority of people. So yeah, so you can prevent cancer by keeping your mitochondria healthy. How do you do that? You have them burn ketones. How do you burn ketones? You do water-only therapeutic fasting or very small amounts of these keto-type diets, small amounts. Blood sugar goes down, ketones go up, cells burn ketones, entropy is reduced, and you keep your cells healthier and unlikely will get cancer. Cancer comes from damage to the respiration. You protect the respiration, you don't get cancer. But the cancer risk goes down precipitously. Who can do this? Primitive peoples on the planet, that Eskimos, Africans in the jungles, and maybe in the rainforests. These are the kinds of people that live a very pristine life. Of course, they die from infections and these other kinds of things, but they generally don't get cancer. Cancer was unheard of in some of these primitive populations. It's an interesting point. If you look at humans and chimps and gorillas are primates, and we share we have a very close genetic composition. Our genome and the chimp and the gorilla's genome is very similar. You know, we all differ by a few percentage here. So here's the situation. Humans have cancer, a lot of cancer. Chimps and gorillas have very little cancer. How is it possible that these three species, all primates, all similar genetically, could have such a different rate of cancer? Chimps and gorillas don't have the kinds of cancers that humans have, and yet we're all very similar genetically. Well, what do chimps and gorillas eat? They eat their natural foods, leaves and fruits and vegetables and these kinds of things. They eat some meat, they eat some, at least the chimps do, and you look at their diets and lifestyle, chimps and gorillas have a different diet and lifestyle than we do. They're eating their natural foods. Our natural foods were berries and nuts and other animals. We've deviated so far from what we were traditionally eating before civilization, and therefore we put all of ourselves at risk for cancer. The control experiment would be to take chimpanzees and give them Coca-Cola, Dunkin's Donuts, smoking, and all the things that we do, and I would be shocked if they didn't get a whole bunch of cancer. And you look at the dogs. Okay, dogs evolved from wolves. If you go to the wild, wolves rarely get cancer. Wolves aren't running around with all domesticated dogs. Cancer is the #1 killer of domesticated dogs. So what are the dogs eating? They're eating the same crap that we're eating, right? The artificial grains put in the dog foods and all these different kinds of things. So they're eating abnormal foods in relationship to their evolutionary past. We as a species are eating foods that are not consistent with our evolutionary past. The consequence is cancer, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, dementia, all these different things. So clearly we have the organisms, we have these already shown that But who is going to go back and live on elephant bone marrow and elk and buffalo, rarely cooked? We're not going to do that. So we just have to be aware that the foods in our environment are putting us at risk for cancer. And the food industry are magnificent in tweaking the tastes of these foods to make them extremely desirable. I mean, nobody can deny that these foods taste great. And so it's hard to deviate from the environment when everything tastes and looks so good. The gorilla and the chimp are not tested like this. I don't know what would happen if you gave them pizza every day and Coke. I'm sure they would eat it, and they probably like it, and they would get fat and they would have cancer. So it's just you have to put things into evolutionary perspective. If you don't know the evolution of the organisms on the planet or how we all got here today, then you have difficulty understanding these concepts. But when you understand biological evolution, then you understand the situation we're in today.
Do most oncologists think fruit should be avoided by cancer patients?
I don't know what oncologists think. It's hard to know what they're going to say. Every oncologist would have a different opinion. They should know whatever they tell the patient, is it going to help them manage their disease without toxicity. Therefore, you have to. It's a shame that we have to go to people that are unfamiliar with these concepts. I mean, you should be talking to oncologists and say they should be the ones, not me. Why am I doing this? Why am I sitting here when they should be sitting here? It would be horrible if you have an oncologist sitting here and he argues everything that I'm saying. He says, no, give them as much sugar as possible. Sugar doesn't cause cancer. Well, sugar doesn't cause cancer. But if you have cancer, sugar can make it grow faster. So people go overboard with a lot of this stuff. Okay, so they're going to eat only plants, and they're going to not eat any sugar, because sugar does not cause cancer. Okay, our body makes sugar from gluconeogenesis. We make sugar from carbohydrates that we eat, from amino acids. Very hard to. You can take two glycerol backbones from fatty acids, put them together, and you get a glucose molecule. But you burn energy to make energy. Sugar is pure energy. You don't have to burn energy to get energy from sugar, or glutamine. Glutamine is a pure energy source, an amino acid. But oncologists should know that there are certain things that work that shouldn't be done, or put patients at risk for having a tumor recurrence. And it's unfortunate that a lot of these guys don't know that, and I don't blame them. I mean, they're only products of the system. They've only been trained to do certain things. It's not their fault that no one came in and told them, hey, this is not good. They just trained to do what they do. Now, some of them are starting to recognize what they've been doing is wrong. I've had some physicians come to me that were oncologists their whole life, had retired, and some were weeping and knowing their whole life that what they were doing to these patients was not the best thing, but this is what they were trained to do, and this is what they did to earn a living, only to realize later on, because they didn't have the real nuts and bolts of why they were doing what they were doing was so horrific in the light of what we know now and what Warburg knew. So it's a pretty much of this very, very unsettling to some people once they come to understand. And then there's some people who are so disturbed by this, they don't want to understand it. They don't want to feel that their whole life's work was putting people at risk for recurrence or even killing them. And that's a very hard thing to do. When you're a health care professional, your job is to heal people and make them well, and the system told you to be treated with chemicals and radiation and things that make the opposite. It's very hard. And if I were a physician and somebody told me what I'm telling them now, I'd be devastated knowing this kind of stuff. But hey, the facts are the facts. You just got to deal with it.
Why have you come to different conclusions than many other people that speak about cancer? Why should anyone believe your conclusions are more accurate than what the mainstream accepted view on cancer is?
Well, I mean, we went back and we looked at where the concept came from. That we uncovered, we did experiments, we reevaluated data in light of two competing theories. So you have facts. The facts of the disease are clear. They've been published in thousands and thousands of research articles. Some of these are clear facts. No one denies the dysregulated cell growth of cancer. No one denies that cancer cells have mutations. No one denies that the metabolism of cancer cells is abnormal. The question is, how do you put all those facts together in a understandable organization? And you have two main competing theories to explain the facts. As I said, you have the mitochondrial metabolic theory or the somatic mutation theory. And you go back and find what was the origin of those ideas from the very beginning. Who were the people that actually defined these things, that made the world the way it is today? Otto Warburg was the most powerful proponent of the mitochondrial metabolic theory, and he had very compelling evidence to support that. Theodore Boveri, a German scientist, looked at cells under the microscope in the sea urchin and saw abnormal chromosomes and guessed that this might be happening to cancer cells. He had no clue about cancer, knew nothing about cancer, and he just speculated that maybe cancer is due to a bunch of chromosomal imbalances. And you know, when DNA was discovered, they found chromosomal imbalances. But what I did was I put together all the experiments that showed that you can take cancer nuclei and put them in with chromosomal imbalances and mutations and put them in a new cytoplasm with new mitochondria, and you don't get cancer. And if you take the nucleus of the normal cell and put it in the cytoplasm of the tumor cell, you got cancer. So it was clear that Otto Warburg's theory can better explain the origin of the disease than can the gene theory. Now, this information is not known to the majority of oncologists. They don't have time to read it. They're working every day in their office, hundreds of cancer patients coming through. They don't have time, like I did, to sit down and evaluate thousands and thousands of research articles in light of two competing theories. So if there's a dogmatic view and everybody thinks it's one way, nobody ever thinks of the other way. So you have to present the data to support the other way, and then you have to let people come to their own conclusion. And they have to look at it and debate it and talk about it. And that's the way things will move forward. So my view, I didn't make this up myself. You know, I look back at the people who actually did these things. I reevaluated all of the things that we're doing in light of two competing theories. And when anyone with a rational capability, and I find that lay people, students and lay people who are not indoctrinated by a particular viewpoint, see and compare and contrast, and they come, wow, it's clear that this is going to explain, much clearer. But people who have been indoctrinated into a dogmatic view cannot accept those findings, regardless. So you think the people that should can't, because they're locked into a dogmatic view. The person that's not linked to a dogma can compare and contrast in a more unbiased way and comes, yeah, makes complete sense. So this is why we have this great skill. The lay people understand what I'm talking about better than the scientists do. And the scientists control the top medical schools, and the top medical schools are beholden to an industry that supports one viewpoint. And there you have this. So the lay people on one side and the medical establishment on the other side, so something has to give. Either we're going to be dictated to by an organization that doesn't understand the biology, and we're all going to be treated in one particular way, or there's going to be some sort of a revolution that's going to take over and say, listen, we've got to discuss this, and we have to do it in a rational way, and we have to let the dust settle, and let's start trying these other options. Because you don't have a dog in the fight, right? And then when you have a loved one that does get cancer, the first thing you do is you run off to the top, and Sloan Kettering or Dana-Farber, MD Anderson, Moffitt Cancer Center. You're going to go to these places, and you're going to think those folks know what they're doing, right? They're trained not to kill you. They're trained to use radiation and chemo at doses that are not going to try to kill you, but they bring you close to death with the hope that your body is going to recover. They don't know about the biology of cancer. And if they do, they're calling the genes, they say the gene mutations cause the abnormal metabolism rather than the reverse. So you have to recognize, you know, if I had some Bert Vogelstein here, he'd be saying, no, there's the evidence. you know, the evidence says the genes. But what about the nuclear transfer experiments? Did you ever address the nuclear? No, I didn't address those experiments. Well, you got to address everything. I address everything. I look at every fact of this disease and weigh them in light of the two competing theories. Who does that, right? So all I did was just bring this to light and let the world determine where the dust settles. Let other people, let the lay people weigh in, because they're ultimately the ones that are going to get blasted by this stuff. So they're not interested in making a lot of money. They just want to save their ass, basically. I want something that's going to help me. And if you're the top guy and you're telling me this, okay, I'm going to follow your method. And it's deceitful. If the guy really now it's not. If he doesn't understand, how can he give you the right information? So you follow the core of what the standard of the field is. And as I said, we got 1,600 people a day dying from this disease, which is unconscionable. And it's every country in the world, the same thing. All people dying, so many maimed and mutilated, and devastated. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just, you think about it, it even gets worse and bigger than you ever thought in your life. It's brutal. No, I think the change could come from people recognizing, coming to know that this is a disease that can be managed. We've seen a lot of evidence without toxicity or minimal toxicity, using procedures and strategies that have been looked at over millennia, but now better organized. And I think that the private organizations, the foundations, need to get their act together. And the sad thing about a lot of these foundations is that they give money out and things, and you look at their scientific advisory board, because lay people say, well, I have to go to the experts. They're going to make the decisions. And you look at, I did this. I looked at the scientific advisory board for the Susan Komen Foundation, and they're all they're all gene guys. They're all, everybody thinks, every one of those guys on the Susan Komen thing, cancer is a genetic disease. So how are you going to raise all this money for breast cancer and expect to get anything done? It's just amazing. So you look at the scientific advisory boards for all the major foundations, and they all think cancer is a genetic disease. So where are you going to get the progress? So the very foundations that should be helping the laypersons are actually inadvertently in the camp of the people who think the cancer is something other than what it is. It's unbelievable. I could go on. I'm just touching the surface of this thing. When you've spent as many hours and years investigating the depths of this disease as the way I have, I could sit here for 3 days telling you things that you would be shocked about, that we know about on this whole thing. And it's more or less the scientific evidence. It doesn't just do policy issues. It's actually the scientific experiments themselves and how they were done, and the controls and all the different things that were put in. And when you'd go through one after another, you say to yourself, you got to be kidding me. So it goes much deeper than this.